Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. I am your host, Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks for joining us today. Before we get started with our interview with Dr. Paul Bedford, the retention guru, check him out if you don't know Paul. We're going to have a great conversation about membership, clubs, technology. I wanted to encourage you to try to join us at the URSA convention. That is March 14th through 15th of this year in San Diego. If you haven't been in a while or you've been before, you know what a great show it is. And I look forward to speaking there, conducting a roundtable on that Thursday, and also speaking Wednesday morning at the convention. Fantastic. San Diego, of course, is beautiful. And the international convention will have people from over 40 countries, thousands of folks in the fitness and health club industry. So please check that out. Also, let me encourage you to investigate URSA's ILC before the show. You should consider joining. A great way to gain access, to learn, to understand more about the legislative initiatives that URSA is undertaking, and so much more. Go to ursa.org, ihrsa.org, and check it out. So before we get into this interview with Paul Bedford, for those that you may not know him, Paul's been in the fitness and health club industry for many decades now and has published quite a number of great reports, research on retention. And basically, how do health clubs look at their membership? What do they do to enact things around using data to understand how clubs are making money, what information they can use to personalize experience, all these things. I've seen Paul speak around the world. He's very active in speaking around China and Asia now, but also Australia, United States, Europe. And Paul really has a great show every year in the UK. He has done a great job. So I think you'll enjoy this discussion with Paul on retention and technology. And I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get Paul on. Hello, listeners, and thanks for joining us again. As I was mentioning in the intro, Dr. Paul Bedford. Most people in the industry space know the name. I've been a big fan of Paul's for many years, and he's been a collaborator, a friend. Had an opportunity to attend and speak at his retention convention, which I'll tell you is in May of next year, May 2nd, I believe. And his reports, his writing, his insights have always been valuable to not just me, but many other people. Paul, thanks for taking time out this morning to join us. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with our listeners today.
You are more than welcome. Always happy to share with you.
Well, Paul, we were chatting before we got started. This is a podcast on technology, of course, and when it comes to business models and how technology is impacting that. I was referencing earlier and with you some of your great reports that you've done over time. And one of my favorite ones has been the White Report 2009 through 12. I think you did a couple of these, right?
Yeah, we did that one. We've done a national one of nearly 1 million for Australia, 1.47 million study for URSA, the Million Strong study. So, yeah, we're quite skilled now at very, very large studies over a period of time.
And it's so curious to me because, having our clubs that we operate and talking with a lot of operators in the business, and what these reports will all point out is numbers like retention and attrition, what that really means and what people really need paying attention to. They might be two different things, right? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, well, from the perspective that I take within our business, we look at retention as something entirely different as attrition. So we measure retention in months, generally, of membership. So the gap between when someone joins and when they either stop paying or when they stop visiting the club. And so that's a measure measured in time, months. The attrition measure is a measure, and we measure it as a rate. We never measure it as a percentage. We measure it as a rate because it's a measure of people. So one of the clear definitions we try and get across to our clients and our customers is that attrition is not the opposite of retention, because months is not the opposite of people. So if you want to truly understand what's going on in your business, you need to actually have some business metrics that measure what's going on rather than just make some assumptions or generalizations about what's happening.
Yes, because you can really, as you and I both know, make some conclusions that are really quite irrelevant, if not damaging to your decision making, right?
Oh, massively. And I've shown clubs data of their own back over the course of a year where the attrition percentage is going down, but the number of people quitting each month is actually going up. And they don't quite work out why that can be. And I said, well, if you've got a really strong sales team and you're using a percentage, your sales are outdoing your levers, and it just confuses the fact. It confuses the information that people are looking at.
Yeah, lifetime value of member, these kind of things. Then also using technology tools. Now, I know that you are speaking again in San Diego at URSA this year in March.
Yeah.
You were mentioning to me you're going to do some things on retention strategies, I believe. Is that your talk going to be on that? Yeah,
we're going to do what we've asked, we've sort of spoken about doing for the San Diego event is looking at how you create a digital retention strategy, a 5-step strategy. And I started that off just in my own head in terms of, okay, if a client came and said, we want to go purely digital in terms of how we deal with our retention, what would we do? And then I think the first thing that I then said to myself was, well, when you say digital, do you mean remote digital in terms of just automated interactions, or do you mean using digital and technology to actually enhance the customer experience? So I'm going to do a bit of both. We'll start by looking at what data you collect, what you're going to measure, and these business metrics so that you actually understand, well, what is my problem? What am I using to measure that? And then what would be an appropriate behavior to try and change that number? So that will probably be step 1. Step 2, we'll then look at what data operators are collecting and where they're storing that, and then how they're displaying that back internally to make sense of it. And then we'll start looking at access control in its various formats, because you've got really no idea what's going on in your business if you don't even know who's coming in and out. And then we'll look at what equipment, we'll look at it from a standpoint of what equipment in the facilities that operators might have. There are different brands of resistance equipment and studios, and say, okay, what can that give us as information and how might we use it? We'll look at CRM systems. We'll look at virtual systems. We'll try and look at a broad range so that people can say, right, I can tackle that part at the moment, but I can't go to that. I'm also keen to explore a little bit around what I refer to as walled gardens, those systems that don't allow anyone else in, and how you can get the most out of that. And also those sort of collaborative APIs-based systems which will allow everybody to collaborate, and the advantages and disadvantages of that. Because I think sometimes people think, if it's completely open access, then that's going to be the best. But sometimes that actually just creates more confusion. So that's where we're going. A bit long-winded, sorry, mate.
No,
but that's what we're going to look at.
And you mentioned silent systems. So as you know, we talk about, enterprise solutions, enterprise platforms that allow a better, an optimal 360-degree view of customers for your business.
Yeah.
And, we see, in our businesses alone that run health, our own health club operations, and many of our colleagues and theirs, a real opportunity there, a real challenge where, some of these organizations will run 8, 10, 12 different siloed cloud systems. Yeah. And even with APIs, some of them with APIs, first off, as you pointed out, many operators still don't know what is important to measure. And then secondly, as you were alluding to, how do you make that easy to do? And would you see that being a big opportunity out there that you come across?
Yeah, I do. And I've got to say, I was on a conference call last week with an operator in the States and a supplier, a technology supplier. And the CIO that we were talking to, said, "Oh, what's the value? What's the product?" It was explained. "What's the value proposition?" It was explained. And then you could just hear in their voice, they were tired just thinking about what that actually meant to implement. And they said, "So we'll have to take this out, we'll have to take that out, we'll have to put that in. It's a huge transition. It's across, let's say, 50 sites." It was more than that. And you could actually hear them not saying they didn't like the product or the idea of the product, but could they even be bothered to do all the work required to put this other product in? And I really felt actually for everybody on the call, because no one was saying the product wasn't good. No one was saying the actual value proposition wasn't good. But actually the deployment was just, and this was the CIO. So there would be all the HR ramifications, the costings, and I got off the call and I said to the people at the manufacturers, I said, "I think that'll be a challenge, not because I don't like it and not because I don't think it will work, but just because it's going to be hard work to deploy."
Yeah, and that's a common thing that you come across a great deal, is especially in legacy operators. They've been doing things in a certain way for so long. There's all this inherent practice that when it comes to really making those changes, it's a really difficult thing to get done, even when it makes complete business sense, right?
Yeah, it's that super tanker analogy. They're so set on a course that changing course is hard. And I think also, and I hear this a lot when I'm working in these sort of collaborative ways, it's that these operators still have a business to run, so the business can't stop. And the teams we're usually talking to, like the technology teams or the HR teams, they have other projects as well on the table. So it's, excuse me, these things are never done in isolation. And you just have to think, what are the ramifications? And I think, like you say, for some of these really large operators, they don't even bother trying, because it's they'd be better off starting another business from afresh, going again, and transferring across at a later date. But that's not going to happen with a lot of them.
No, and as you see across industries, digital transformation is a big challenge to pull off. And by our estimation, I think I shared this when I was at the retention convention last year with you, is we think about maybe 5% of operating brands in bricks and mortar fitness are smart. They kind of understand it. Another maybe 15% are good. They know where they've got to go. And then you have a big swath of mediocre and failing where, and that's, you see this across all industry spaces. So and so I agree with you. So when we talk about technology, then I know you've been traveling a lot to China lately, UK, all over the world. What are you seeing as the key things that are popping up in the last few years from your perspective on the application of tech in general? What do you see there?
Well, I think if we take China for a start, it's interesting with China because they've almost leapfrogged over debit cards, credit cards. It's all in their phones. It's all done on QR codes. Everybody uses WePay to pay for things. And they've gone from cash to digital without the incremental step of cards. And so access control for their clubs is often much stronger. Secondary spend recall is much stronger. So just that simplistic cash transaction or the money transaction, it's a fascinating look at eventually where the West will go. Although, obviously those people invested in those systems are going to hang on to them for as long as possible. But, I got cash out in China recently, and you could see them wince at the idea that they actually have to take some physical money. So I think that the approach or the things that I'm seeing that I'm liking, and it sounds a bit of a cliche, but they're all the things that make things frictionless, that make the actual end use easier. I've not had a lot to do with facial recognition. I've looked at it. But if that means someone can walk into the club, they get AIM access, and they don't have to slow down because of that, and other systems then feed off of that, then that's a great thing to have. was speaking with someone last week who said, "Oh, and I know this is more common, that their club, all the membership cards are in people's smartphones. They don't issue a card anymore, a physical card." And they said, because no one is going to lose their phone. And they're not going to be without their phone. They're not going to turn up to the club and go, "Oh, I didn't bring my phone today." It's like they won't put their phone down is perhaps more of the challenge. So at the simplest level, it would be just things that make the infrastructure of using the club simpler and less frictionless. Then I would be focusing on start looking at what can we actually do for customers and their experiences. And I know when I look at the different persuasive technologies out there, or persuasive techniques that are used in technology, the idea of customization and right time, right place type deliveries, I think our industry has a huge potential there, but it's actually got to get the infrastructure and the basics right first.
Absolutely. You see this in retail. You see this in a lot of different, you mentioned banking. And do you think, I mean, I won't preface with what I think, but do you think that the people or operators or concepts that come to market delivering that, offering that really frictionless experience, offering heightened level of service that's easy to consume and engaging, you see those operators having a distinct advantage, I'd assume?
I'm not sure they're a distinct advantage right now, but I think it will move towards that because the consumer's desire for things to happen more quickly, more easily, they'll want that. And then I think there'll also be a group of operators that are almost the non-technology facilities. And perhaps that's going to be more to do with smaller studios, PT studios, where you leave your phone at the door, you go and have a workout, there's no technology involved. It's your break from tech as a workout. But I think the bigger operators could certainly take massive advantage of just understanding their data and then using that data to prompt actions, prompt behaviors. But there's one at the moment, I think you saw it at the retention convention, the guys at Coach AI who've got this app that, all it's designed to do is encourage customers to visit the club.
Yep.
Now, the challenge with that is, and we're seeing the early results from their studies that are coming through good. What if the actual experience when you get to the club is poor? So you take this technology, you make it work for you, you drive more user visits, but actually when they visit the club, actually the experience they have is poor, and therefore they churn even faster. So I think any piece of technology has to be thought of within sort of the ecosystem of the whole business, both digital and human as analog. Otherwise, they're just not going to work. I don't think you can drop any one digital solution in and get a miracle from it, because we're actually dealing with humans.
That's right. And business model design, if you're wise about how you're designing your business model, that'll beat product or service all to hell. I mean, it's really, as you say, it's really the way all of it's put together in a proposition people understand, and it's differentiated. And we were talking about this on the call earlier, and I want to get back to this. So with tools like Mosaic or Prism, all these different tools that are, with the cloud, you can pretty much get anything in the way of data done compared to the old days. Why aren't operators paying attention to their data yet? Is it just too hard? And I know not all operators, by the way, but a lot of them, even our own company. I mean, the level of attention to basic data is really not where it should be. Why?
I don't think in most businesses there's a dollar value added to that information. So if I say, when I'm working my operators and I work with, imagine that every cell phone number you collect is worth $1. Every accurate email address you get is worth $1 to you. And then look through your onboarding forms and your signing up forms and look how much data is missing. Almost to the point, and I'm not suggesting this, but almost to the point where you take the sales sign-up form and you say your commission's based on how many of these things you get completed. And if you miss things out, you don't get the dollars associated with that. Because the salesperson, probably not so worried. They're only interested in a few metrics. And that, how many sales have we made? And I just think companies don't understand the value, where some businesses are probably making, not in fitness, but some businesses are probably making more money understanding their data and using their data than they are from actual retail.
Right.
Right. So they could almost give away the products if they could get the customer data.
Yes. Look at Google.
Yeah.
That's their entire business model almost.
Yeah. So I don't think companies actually understand the value of the data. I know this goes back a little while, but we worked with an operator here in the UK, 43 site operator, did a full analysis of every one of their sites, came back to them and pointed out to them an opportunity to add £11 million to their bottom line every year. And all they had to do was make 2 changes to their business practice. And they weren't significant changes. I wasn't asking them to, tear down and start again. And we presented it to the team, the senior management team, and they sat there in silence for about 2 minutes. And afterwards I said to them, have I said something to offend you? And they went, no, you've told us more about our business in the last 20-minute presentation than we probably understand from the last 20 years of running it.
Right.
So I know I'll sometimes describe myself as a translator, in that I translate the data into actions that operators can take, because they can take their data. And I've had, people ring me up and say, oh, we had this huge data analytics firm run our data for us, and these are the results. Well, what should we do? And they've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the analysis, but there was no one within that business that says, or the analytics businesses that can then give them advice about what action to take. So I think there's that gap. We're collecting data-ish, we're analysing it sometimes, and then there's a struggle to translate that data into day-to-day activities that the clubs can perform. And I think when you can put a dollar amount against each activity or each element of that activity, I think a lot of operators would suddenly sit up and suddenly go, we want to know that. And to be fair, the low-cost, high-value operators, high-volume operators, they started with a data and technology model as the basis. And I know when I've worked with them, we're able to access so much information. And just small amounts, collecting, here we call it postcode, you'd call it zip code, but collecting someone's work postcode as well as their home zip code.
Yep.
So you can see, well, actually, are they close to work when they use the club, or are they close to home? And just having those 2 locations, you can then give them an offer of, okay, you've joined this one. Would you like access to the second site, which is close to your home, for an additional $1?
Right.
But that all adds up.
Oh.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up.
It absolutely does. And it also creates value for the customer. And this is a great example of personalization, basic personalization. That's what that is right there, informing you on how to market, how to service these people better. And if you don't see that data, it is impossible for you to just do that off the, out your back pocket, because there's so many opportunities to consider what added value might be given, or what opportunity there is to do something special, or also knowing what cohorts of customers are really your most profitable, relevant customers versus some customers where you don't really want them. You don't necessarily want to spend a lot of money acquiring certain customers, because what you're really doing is setting your business up to fail, right? I mean, right. It's pretty basic stuff. So tell me on your thoughts on user experience. We know Cyber with McFit, with the digital model they have, others that are doing digital monetization around the club membership. How are you seeing that emerge in the UK and around the world? Is this early days of that? It's still in an experimentation phase? What do you think?
I generally think we're still in the experimentation phase. I think, excuse me, in the Western countries, we've got, at the moment, this time of year, we're seeing lots of TV adverts here in the UK for streaming services, like Peloton, like the TV on demand type methodologies that are going, we're not even clubs anymore, we're just this service. That's more, I've not seen that as much in the Asian market. I think still in the Asian market, things like Group X are huge because they like that social interaction. They like coming together and dancing and having fun, and despite the time pressures. So it's not a timings thing. But I think it's in the early phases. I think some of it's been hyped in terms of, if you get this will turn your club around. But I'm certainly aware of, things like virtual classes, where I've spoken to people like customers in virtual classes who go, I would never have come to a spinning class with an instructor because actually I've looked through the door and I've seen the people in there and they terrify me, the instructor and the other customers. So I'm quite happy to sit here with 3 or 4 other people at a quieter period of time and using it. So I think we're getting better use of space. And I think the customer will evolve as the products evolve because they're learning how to use them and whether they fit in. So I use yoga. I access yoga digitally because my suppleness is failing me now, and I do a lot of cycling. But I don't want to go to a yoga facility. I don't want, and I know a lot of people will love this, but I don't want the philosophy of yoga. I just want the poses. And I want to hear them in words that I understand, like downward dog, as opposed to the traditional Indian words. And I think we'll consume more digitally and online, streamed. But I don't think we'll ever get away from the bricks and mortar. I know we've had that discussion many years ago. But I think that's why the bricks and mortar have got to distinguish who they are, who they're going for, and up the quality of what they do.
Yeah. And things about experience when you do go into a location, what you just said, and what are the things that make an impact on that member, and it's come down to, it's a much more competitive market. I think I've told you, and I think you'd agree, UK has got to be the most competitive market on the face of the earth. I tell people that when I go there. I mean, my word, the level of competition. I think in the city of London proper, I think we talked about hundreds of clubs within a 1 mile radius.
Yeah.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
And so if you're not really creating a place that people really enjoy visiting, the music, the lighting, the staff, everything is done well, and you're mediocre in that bricks and mortar execution, you're gonna have a problem, right?
Yeah. And I think just with that as well, there's differentiation. I was talking to someone, my son created an experience for me recently. I was preparing a presentation. I had lots of images of different facilities. I was flicking through, and he caught sight of one, and he said, "Oh, where's that?" And I said, "Which one?" And he said, "Go back." And I went back a couple to with the one I thought he meant, which was a fairly traditional, very big club with lots of equipment. And his response straight away was, "No, Dad, that's a club for you. There's another one." And as we flicked through, it was a facility that was more functional. There were tires, chains, ropes. And he went, "That one, where's that? I'd go to that one." And it suddenly made me think, in his eyes, the big box traditional facilities are where I would go as his dad, as opposed to where he would go.
Right.
And my work experience was, for a long time, I was involved in nightclubs and music. And there are genres of music that I wouldn't associate with because my parents like them. And I'm wondering if we've just been in the industry, we've had an industry just long enough now where we're getting these, that is old school, this is new school. If you still like Elvis, you'll always like Elvis. But actually the market's moved. And And so I think that differentiation for operators is going to be huge. But this is where I think the digital comes in as well, because I know about 10 or more years ago, we did a study and we looked at digital interaction via email and SMS with customers who'd visited the club. And if they'd visited a club and then got the message afterwards saying, we were glad you were in the club today, actually, they were more pissed off that you knew they were in the club and didn't speak to them. Whereas nowadays, the idea that someone knows you were in the club, messaged you, I think is much more acceptable.
Correct.
So I think that's where I think also the sort of the online experiences for user experience, like the streaming, like the virtual, will evolve because people think that's part of it. But I also don't think our industry is very linear anymore. It used to be quite easy. Small clubs charge a small amount of money, large clubs charge a large amount of money, and you were somewhere on a line. Now it looks more like the Big Bang. And you're just trying to identify where in the universe you fit.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very important thing for any operator to be clear on. Where do they fit? Paul, again, my audience, I want to remind them we're talking to the foremost expert on retention in the health club industry in the world, Paul Bedford, Dr. Paul Bedford. Paul, again, thanks for spending time this morning talking about tech,
You're welcome.
I want to ask you for our listeners one last thing, a big question.
Yeah.
And listeners, we didn't rehearse this. Paul and I like to just wing it as we go. So if you're out there in the world today, and I know it depends on the market, I know it depends on a lot of variables, but for operators out there, for entrepreneurs out there, in the context of their businesses, what are the couple top things that you would tell anybody that they need to be paying attention to right now?
Okay. I'm going to default to my favorite three. And my favorite three are visits, interaction, and programming. And I call them retention VIP. If your customers don't visit your facility, it doesn't matter what equipment you've got, what technology you've got, how good your staff are, they're not engaging with your business. So the number one thing you should be focusing on is getting a next visit. Think of visits in terms of perhaps the way restaurants do things. They're always trying to encourage the next visit. Sometimes with special offers, sometimes just by providing an excellent service. Visit frequency, really, really important. Only actually needs to be once a week to retain them. It's not enough to get them to change their body, but enough to retain them. Then interact with them. The advances in technology mean that some of the digital interactions now are as good as a human interaction. And so we want to find ways to interact with them, recognize they've turned up today, thank them for visiting, talk to them about where they are, and then see where we can support them. And then the programming, make sure that the programming fits the demographic of the club, not the demographic that the trainers perhaps want or the owners want. There might be some great new kettlebell course to go on, but if it's not relevant to your user group, then maybe it's not worth doing. I berate a lot of operators I work with. They say you do customer service training once a year or once every couple of years, yet it's a requirement that the staff do this every day. Now, if they have to do it every day, why aren't you thinking about training them and making sure they're doing it more frequently? So those would be my three. For anyone who's listening in, get your customers to visit. When they talk, give them recognition that they made the effort to visit us today. We need to be thanking them just for turning up. When they leave, we need to be prompting them to come back. And then programming, make sure that our programming matches the client group rather than just perhaps sometimes the fads of the industry and the things that we want to teach. Those would be my three.
That's great, Paul. And for the listeners, listen, lunchtime lessons. Look at Paul's post on LinkedIn and on Twitter and the various platforms, the retention guru. I love those lunchtime lessons. You started that out at the end of last year, was it?
We started those in the middle of last summer. We had a period of time, we were having a discussion about, most people were heading off for their summer breaks. What could we do? And one of my colleagues said, well, why don't we each lunchtime give someone either a suggestion, a piece of research, or ask a question. And we've been running them Monday to Friday ever since. And over the course of a month, we get about 11,000 views. And I encourage people, if you do get hashtag lunchtime lessons and you see them, ask questions, but add comments. I really enjoy it when I get into conversations with people. And we don't have to agree. We just have to agree. We have to disagree agreeably, as my friend Keith would say. We haven't all got to be from the same position, but I think the idea is that when people take a break at lunchtime, give them something to think about for the afternoon. And we'll continue to do those all the time. We're getting great responses.
Yeah, I loved your last one. Understand your strengths and limitations before proceeding with the retention strategy. Hashtag lunchtime lessons. That's fantastic. Yeah. Paul, any final comments for the audience? I know you'll be at URSA this year. You have your retention convention. Is it May 2nd? Yeah.
May 2nd here in the UK, and we will record it and we'll make those recordings available a month or so after the event. So we're almost sold out on that already, and we haven't even started marketing. All I would say for this year, for 2019, for anyone listening, go and start cleaning up your data and making sure you've got access control. Because without that, you are in some ways blind to things that are going on in your business. Once you've got that in place, then you can really start, rather than just copying what other people are doing, you can make decisions for yourself. That would be my advice to listeners today.
That's great advice. Paul Bedford, Dr. Paul Bedford, thanks so much for making time for the audience. The leading expert on retention in the world. I look forward to seeing you at URSA again, as always, and to your presentations and your content. Thanks, Paul, so much. You're a dear friend.
You're welcome. Take care.
Hi, everyone. This is Bryan O'Rourke again. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. The podcast is brought to you by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, as well as my company, Videri Ventures, Moon Mission Media, and others. We hope you enjoyed the content. Please feel free to share it and join us again soon when we bring to you another leader in the fitness space talking about technology and what it means to our industry. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again very soon.